So welcome to the BBB Sharing podcast. My name is Paris Lape. I am a podcast host and producer here at Ignite Sparked by BBB. Today I'm with Lisa Bradshaw. She is an attorney and owner of Purely Law, P.L.C. She just started this business this year. She's been an attorney for 3 years, and she has an amazing story to tell. Thank you for being here, Lisa.
Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Well, let's just jump into your story because it's so incredible. Tell us a little bit about how you became an attorney and started your business.
So I followed an unconventional path. I had originally thought that I would go to law school straight out of college, but due to a variety of circumstances, one being the LSAT and the other being a cost of a legal education, I talked myself out of going into law school. And so instead, I kind of dabbled in a lot of different things, doing medical transcription, genealogy, even working in retail, until finally I was a claims adjuster for a workers' compensation insurance company. And I just wasn't satisfied with my life. I felt like I wasn't living up to my potential. And so then one day I made the decision that I was going to follow in my brother's footsteps and enlist in the Army. And so I did, and I became a paralegal. And when I signed that enlistment contract, I made a promise to myself that I would use my GI Bill then to go to law school. So I shipped off to basic and went through all of that and got to my first duty station in Hawaii. And then while there, I met my husband, Stephen, and met, fell in love, got married. We deployed to Afghanistan for a year, and just doing all the normal Army stuff. And then we were PCS to Texas, and that's where we had our first child. And then my term ended with the military, but his continued. We had our second child, and then there was a really bad day, but he was diagnosed with stage 4 alveolar rhabdomyosarcoma, which is a very rare cancer. And he was essentially terminal from day one. And so in that moment, I then quit my job. I became his full-time caregiver while raising our toddler and infant sons, and just tried to keep him alive.
Wow.
And then it was a very rough time, as anybody knows, if they've gone through that or watched a loved one suffer with cancer. And 2 months before he died, he made me promise that I would still go to law school after he died. And I made the promise to him because I didn't want to disappoint him, but that was certainly a promise I didn't think that I would be able to keep. Mm-hmm. I didn't know how I would even go on and live without him. And when he died November 25th of 2017, and my world just went dark. And honestly, like all hope went away. And I would tell myself, that, we had these dreams, but a dream without hope is just a plan. And what's the point of a plan in life, mm-hmm. When things never go according to plan, as mm-hmm. I had experienced. And so, kind of wallowed in that grief and darkness for a few months until finally a light started to glimmer. And then that's when I had an epiphany that what I needed to do was I needed to go to law school, I needed to become an attorney, and I needed to help other people who were going through similar hardships, help them with estate planning, help them with guiding them through that process, the process leading up to when you lose a loved one, but then also the aftermath and going through probate and on all the other stuff that just nobody ever talks about. And, I was in my 30s when I became a widow, and I didn't know any other widows. So, no one told me, what to expect or what life would look like. No. And then it was also, and I had 2 young children. And mm-hmm. so, life in that moment when he died, I had all of these identities, right? I was a wife, I was a mother, a co-parent, if you will, and his caregiver. And then he died, and suddenly all of that was stripped, and I didn't even know who I was, what I was supposed to do in this world. Mm-hmm. But like I said, then I finally realized what my calling was, and then that became my mission. And so a year after he died, I applied to law school, got in, and then the following fall matriculated and got through law school during COVID,
wow.
which was also,
impressive.
An interesting, curveball that was thrown.
Yeah.
And so, I came into law school much later in life. I became an attorney later in life. I passed the bar when I was 40 years old. But to be perfectly honest, if I had gone to law school straight out of college, I wouldn't have been the attorney that I am today. I really needed a lot of life experience so that then I could help other clients who then are facing similar situations to guide them through that and let them know what their different options are and how to get through it. And just that even in those darkest times when, everything's going bad and looks like you're going to be going through hell, like you can get through it. If I could get through it, anybody can get through it. But, sometimes you just need help. And I like to be that kind of a guiding light for people. Like that's how I see myself as an attorney, and every client matters to me. If it's important to you, it's important to me. Your family matters, my family matters. So I put that same care and everything into every client. And so, and for me, an estate plan is an urgent matter. Like everybody should have an estate plan. Whether you think you need one or not, but you really should have different things in place just to make it easier for your loved ones to then handle stuff after you're gone. And so I treat everything as, okay, well, I can get this done today if you want, to come back and sign your documents. I don't want anybody waiting on me for an estate plan. So that's just kind of how my personal mission goes, just to make that definitely a priority with every single client.
Yeah. So you've lived like 10 different lives. Essentially, you wear all the hats. You're a veteran, you're a mom, you're an attorney. You went to school later in life, so you even have that experience of what that's like going to school later. My mom went to school when she was in her 30s. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, she went back to college.
Look at
so
her.
It's not easy doing all this stuff. And you said that you mentioned earlier that you wanted to be a lawyer from the time you were young. What advice would you give to people who are looking to get into law and like be an attorney or get to where you're at?
Honestly, I would say, obviously you have to go to college first. But I would say don't go straight to law school from college. I would encourage people to at least have a year or two where they do something else, experience life, like real life, because I think what happens, so attorneys get a bad rap, and that's the other reason why I also wanted to start my own firm. I want to change that. I want, when clients come in to see me, even if they're going through a bad place in their life because, they're facing the death of a loved one or they've just lost a loved one. So they're already in a bad place, but I want their experience with me to be a good one. That, if they're ever sitting around talking with family or friends and people are commiserating about, oh yeah, this attorney, whatever, but that they would say, oh, I had a good experience with mine, mine helped me. Like that's what I'm trying to do, is change that narrative as far as attorneys go. But I would say that I think what happens a lot, just in my experience, but if you do college and you go straight to law school and then you just go immediately into the workplace as an attorney, I don't think you're necessarily as in touch with average people, right? And just with the struggles of life. Like you've just been in school, and school is a very safe, protected environment. Yes, maybe you were living in an apartment on your own. I'm not saying that people don't have certain struggles, but you were just in this little, kind of capsule, and you were insulated from things. And then now you're an attorney, and sometimes I think that goes to people's heads. And then maybe you just don't realize that there are just, average people out there that you didn't go to college, certainly didn't go to law school, and don't understand, maybe what it is you're trying to explain to them. And so sometimes I think there's this a missed communication in there where you really need to know who your audience is, who your clients are, and what it is, how to communicate effectively with them so that they really understand everything versus just, someone comes in, a lot of times people come in and say, this is what I want. And I'll be like, okay, I hear you on that. But let me tell you, these are all of your other options. This is, the fees for all of these different things, whether there's a fee or not, depending on if it's something that you could do yourself or something that I can do for you. But then it's like, okay, now you make an informed decision. I'm not, just because you said you want something, I might not think that you really need it, like it's absolutely necessary in your situation. So I'm going to give you some other options versus, okay, yeah, whatever you say, I'll do that. But now I've produced a document for you. You don't really understand what that document says. You don't do what you're supposed to with that document. Then that document doesn't serve the purpose that you thought that it would. And so you really just paid a lot of money for a piece of paper that you don't understand.
What would you say your process is for working with like a new client when they don't know what to ask for? What does that look like?
Well, so for starters, I've created lots of different intake sheets depending on if you're coming in for estate planning or you're something business related. So I handle a lot of different things. So I handle estate planning, I handle real estate, closings, but also, if you're just doing a transfer, like a deed of gift, and I handle business matters. So forming companies, if you want to merge or domesticate your company, different corporate actions that you might need to take. And then estate administration, so the probate side. So those are all the services that I offer. So I have a lot of intake forms based on maybe what your initial need might be. And when it comes to estate planning, it's a pretty lengthy intake form, which just asks a lot of questions so that I have a snapshot of kind of where you are in life and what major assets, different types of things that you have, whether you have life insurance policies, retirement plans, if you have any existing estate planning documents, what property you own, where that property is located, because if it's not all in Virginia, then there are different things that we need to discuss as it pertains to that as well. So I generally ask people, start off by just filling out my intake form. And then when we meet, we go over all of that and then we discuss every single thing, to find out, because again, there are different ways, like an estate plan. Okay, a basic estate plan is a will, but then also your general durable power of attorney and your medical power of attorney and living will, also known as advanced medical directive. So those two documents are for your lifetime. The will is obviously when you pass away. But there are so many other ways that you can also transfer your assets when you pass away. And so I discuss all of those different options with people so that they can choose what's best for them. Because it's not enough just to know, okay, if I do this in a will, okay, that's taken care of. Yes, but will it be easy for your loved one after you're gone to handle things, or will there be a time delay before they can have access to your assets because they first have to go through probate and qualify as the executor of your estate? So there are different ways and methods that we can make it where they can have instant access to certain assets, and then other things, yes, can go through probate, go through your will. So we just go over all of it because the truth is, a lot of people don't know what they're supposed to say or, to include in an estate plan. And so by having people fill out my intake form, it just gives me different points to, okay, let's talk about this now. And then let's talk about this. And then, big picture, what's your overall goal? Like, who is it that you want to inherit from you? And then as an estate planner, I like to think of myself, right, in law school, you're given hypotheticals. So it's always like, okay, well, if this happens, then what? So as an estate planner, I kind of take that to heart. And it's like, okay, so you say that you want everything to go to your children. But now let's take that one step further. And let's say none of your children survive you. Where do you want it to go then? So just always having a backup plan so that, because I like creating a document that can survive a lot of different scenarios without you having to come back in to modify it, just in case should any of those worst case scenarios happen, just in case you don't have the capacity to execute a new will at that point, or you don't have the time to execute one, or, that something happens. So I always, people might think I'm ridiculous for, going down these different rabbit holes with them, but I just feel like it's important. Like, you need to understand, because if you don't have a valid estate plan, like if either you just don't have one at all, or the people that you've named in your estate plan don't survive you, then you're going to have default rules that are going to come into play and dictate where your estate will go. So if you don't want the default rules to apply, you need to proactively plan for those. And so that's my approach. But like I said, it starts off with my intake form, and then it turns into usually a very lengthy discussion, because I believe that, number one, I believe that people need to be informed about stuff. Again, I know from personal experience, I was not told, what would happen. I didn't know how Texas worked, honestly.
You were thrown into it.
Exactly. I mean, like, I was born and raised in California, and then I had relocated to Virginia when I was in college. And then, the military then wound up in Texas. So it's not like it was my home state where I'd ever gone through, the loss of anybody in that state before. And so I believe in educating people as well. Like, okay, this is what the law is going to do if you don't do something proactively. Because if you don't know, then you can't properly plan for things. And you can't make an informed decision about what you want to do with your estate if you don't know what's going to happen if you don't plan for something.